Today, on this episode of Twin Talk, we're going to focus on women in STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. Hey, everybody, this is Joni.
And I'm Cindy.
And this is
Twin Talk. We're identical twins, but even though we look alike, we are very different.
I live in Washington.
And I live in Alabama. But we both have very different careers. I run newspapers.
And I'm in the nuclear industry. Even with those different careers, we both have been very successful.
And we've both had some setbacks. So even though we live on separate sides of the country, we are going to use technology to bring us together to talk about a lot of the things that we really like.
Things that we find important, like professional development,
And leadership,
mental health,
parenting,
and some of our hobbies.
So please join us for Twin Talk.
One of the things that we've been focusing on as a country is recognizing that we don't have as much diversity as we would probably like to see in many of the areas of either leadership roles or areas of industry in our country. So in bringing attention to that, the best people to do that are those of us women who are in the STEM fields and have been, like myself, for 25 years out there in STEM in industries. I'm in the nuclear industry, environmental engineering, environmental cleanup. I have noticed for myself less growth than I probably even expected I would see at this point. I would think at this point that I would see more females in leadership roles, but what I've noticed is actually more of a decline. We have a guest speaker today. We have Ashley Gann, who is the chief meteorologist at Birmingham's CBS 42. Other than being a wife and a mother, she's also a gender equality advocate and even is a public speaker and uses opportunities and platforms like we have here at Twin Talk to share with communities her own experience that she's had in the field of meteorology. Her background is actually as an aerospace engineer, and we're going to ask her to tell us more about that. So trained, smart, educated, and on TV. So I look forward to hearing what Ashley has to say and sharing some of our experiences, given that I'm also an engineer in a male-dominated industry and can see a lot of the diversity pitfalls that we have in my industry as well. I'd also like to point out that Ashley and I are both Auburn Engineers. I look forward to talking to her today and finding out what she has to share with the Twin Talk community about her experience as a woman in STEM. Hi, welcome. Welcome,
Hey,
Ashley. It's nice to meet you.
Yes,
You know my sister, Cindy.
I do. Twins. And I mean, obviously y'all look alike, but it's, I feel like I'm talking to her, but you're all the way out there. And you know,
Right. I know we have similar voices, but there is one thing that's really super different about me and Cindy, and that's
War Eagle.
War Eagle.
I knew
You and I
liked you.
are both Auburn engineers. Yeah.
That's right. That's great.
Yeah. And that's something I get to take all the way to Washington with me. So
Awesome.
yeah, occasionally I'll have an Auburn shirt on and I'll have somebody say War Eagle to me. And
I love that. I think that's one of the coolest traditions that Auburn fans have that I really feel like other schools don't have as much. But it is neat. I mean, I've walked through airports across the globe and seen someone in an Auburn shirt and say War Eagle, and it's just like, it's like saying hello.
yeah, if I know I'm flying towards the South, I'll literally purposely wear an Auburn shirt because I want someone to talk to me about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it's nice to connect when we don't, get the chance to do that when you're out here. So, for me, I went to Auburn because part of it's because I'm from Tuscaloosa, and so it was kind of like this way to get out of home, not live in mom's basement and go to school.
Right.
But at the same time, I knew I wanted to study something technical because I was really passionate about environmental cleanup and environmental issues. And that was getting kind of big in the 90s anyway. What was your motivation to studying aerospace engineering when you decided to do that?
Well, I've always been fascinated with space, the atmosphere, pretty much atmospheric science in general. And when I was 12 years old, I actually attended space camp in Huntsville.
Oh, you
And
did.
wow, I loved it. And while I was there, just my intrigue, my passion for astronomy, for atmospheric science grew. But interestingly enough, while we were there, I took a little elective about space weather. And at the end of it, I was really more drawn to being a meteorologist. So actually, at the end of space camp is when I told my parents, hey, Mom, when I grow up, I want to be a meteorologist. And, they patted me on the head and they said, okay, thinking I would change my mind 10 times. Right.
Mhm.
And so I go through high school, and we happen to live in Atlanta, which is the headquarters for the Weather Channel. And I was able to go on a tour there right after a really major national weather event had occurred. And I was just fascinated with everything weather. Well, I get to the end of my senior year of high school. I had applied and gotten into a really great weather school. But then got cold feet, to be honest. And I thought, oh, this is an incredibly specialized degree. My mom's an Auburn grad, and that's what led me to go visit the campus. So one day I said, Mom, let's just go for a visit. I did. I loved the campus. I had grown up going to football games there, but I had never been there sans 80,000 screaming fans. So I said, let me just go on a normal. So she took me down. All that to say, fell in love with the campus, but they didn't have meteorology at Auburn as a degree. So I thought, well, let me major in more of a broad science. So I chose aerospace engineering. Well, truth be told, little fun fact, I actually started out in physics. After semester 1, I realized physics was not for me. So everyone's like, oh, so you chose the easy degree, like aerospace engineering, like it was.
Oh, yeah. Oh, right.
But,
yeah. The easy one.
Physics seems so much more abstract. At least engineering your building, right? Like there's physical laws that you have to abide by in engineering. But so I went into aerospace, but I had my mindset on after that, I'm going to go get my master's in meteorology. So at the end of my undergrad, I completed in 4 years. I did go on and get my master's in geosciences, and I have a concentration in both operational and broadcast meteorology. So I could do anything from work for the government with the National Weather Service or NOAA to doing broadcasting. So I started out in broadcasting, and here I am over 15 years later. So it's been great, but my background, all my training is on the technical side of engineering. But I really feel like all that problem solving has helped me get to where I am. And what's really cool about that is my engineering background actually helped prepare me for my master's degree. Because what a lot of people don't realize is that meteorology is very technical. We had to take thermodynamics, atmospheric science, and we have to understand the physics of the atmosphere. So the same things, same equations I was using for an airplane, Bernoulli's equation, for example, or all of these equations that apply to how an airplane flies, I applied the exact same equation to how a raindrop falls through the air. It was just a different object that I was applying the same equations to. I didn't know that at the time when I was 18 going into college that it would benefit me in grad school, but it did. And but ever since then, I've become hugely passionate about encouraging young girls to pursue STEM and trying to help motivate and empower girls to pursue that. And even after they get jobs, to really help encourage companies not only to hire more women, but also to look at promoting them within their companies. So that retention piece, it's one thing to get them in, but it's another thing to retain them as well.
Right. I know. So when I was studying, at Auburn, I took a meteorology class over at space engineering. I can't remember why. It must have been one of the electives that they gave you the choice for, And I loved it. It was class. I took a meteorology class. It must have been one of the electives. I can't remember why, but I actually remember the teacher, and when there's those memorable ones and the ones that weren't, and I enjoyed it. Oh. Right. And, I did kind of like you, where I finished in 4 years too. It was like I knew what I wanted to do. I wanted to go to law school and wanted to be an environmental lawyer and kind of an Aaron Brockovich kind of thing.
I was about to say Julie Roberts.
Yeah. So, but then after I finished, I did well. Like I had really good grades, and I thought it was going to be hard. And I was like, well, maybe I'll end up changing my mind and do something else and still go to law school, right? The technical undergrad was important to me to then have the law school. But then as I got into it, I was like, oh, this isn't as hard as I thought it was going to be. Like, I can do this. And I think that's another thing for girls. And even really, I have a 14-year-old boy. And even I could see that in him too, is like, as soon as it gets hard, they just shrink into it. Like, oh, this is hard. And then it comes like, oh, chugga chugga. When you get in there and you get through it in 4 years. I took the LSATs my senior year, and I got a 142, which you want a 150 to be competitive. So I felt like it was a little low to be competitive, and then said, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to go out and work and just work, and then make a decision on a master's later, which I did end up going back to Auburn. Mm-hmm. Some of it's because I was getting married and he was still there. We met as undergraduates and he got a nursing degree. Okay. And so he was the nurse and I was the engineer. But when I went back, I was like, I'll study something. And I ended up in the College of Agriculture and studying communities and community organization and agricultural economics. And I think that's helped a lot with the nuclear world, because I'm in these communities where people are really impacted by this multi-billion-dollar cleanup happening right in their backyard. Why my community? Why am I chosen as the one? And so I ended up actually for like 3 years, I was the main Department of Energy point of contact with the public here. And I spent 3 years with them in all their public meetings. And I found that it helped marry that master's degree with the undergrad. So I'm glad to hear you say that that's a similar experience to you.
Yeah, that's great.
So, I think about weather and I think about how it's like predicting the future, right?
Yes. Like and colors for the sky.
Yeah. And that kind of perfectionism thing. Do you find that there's an expectation, and maybe even more of an expectation, for you to really predict it well as a female in meteorology?
Oh, absolutely. The history would prove that meteorologists on television started out as men. And that's how we even got the name weatherman. Oh, watch your local weatherman. Well, of course, women started to get hired into these roles in the 80s and 90s. But what's very interesting is I know personally women that were the first in their cities to be meteorologists. I know women personally. So that means just in our generation. We're not talking like 2 and 3 generations ago. We're talking like good. In our generation. These are first. These are women breaking those glass ceilings. So because of that, there's, I think, for women in science in general, but I'll speak specifically as it relates to your question to women in weather. But not only do we have to forecast and compete with men and women, just across the board. We're competing in our own markets for accuracy of our forecast every single day. So science matters. So how we do our forecast matters. But then I think women on top of that have to also break through a stereotype every day. And I do think that there's a subconscious bias that exists in a lot of people that they don't really realize is there. But what's the first thing that comes to mind when you see a female telling the weather? It's a weather girl. And, sometimes I get upgraded to weather lady. At least I'm not being,
that's an upgrade.
Like a gender and an age thing. At least at that point, they're just identifying my gender, not gender and age. Because I feel like weather girl, you're like, hey, well,
girl. Hey,
yeah. It's just like, oh, that's a cute weather girl. So you have to overcome a stereotype. And again, sometimes it's this unconscious bias. Not intended, but I have a funny story. I was at the grocery store once. A gentleman bumped in next to me, and we're picking out lettuce in the produce section. And he goes, "Hey, are you that weather lady at the TV station?" And then he kind of caught himself. And he goes, "I don't mean that. I meant meteorology." And I said, "It's fine.
Back it up. Back it up."
So it's like, I do try to let it roll off my back just a little bit, and I'm not offended. But it's about educating people, right? In today's world, it's just about kind of helping people understand that. Because a lot of times people think that you're hired for your looks or you're, they're hiring to meet a quota. No, I have to be just as educated as my counterparts, and oftentimes almost more, because I'm having to prove myself not only to management who's hiring me, a company that's hiring me, but also to viewers that then have to like you. So then you have to earn that respect. You have to earn that trust, and you have to earn that credibility.
Yeah.
And that comes over time, and that comes with consistency and accuracy. But letting people know that, you mean business is something that women have to face. It's not just being a cute face and not to say it so critically, but just like being a bimbo on TV or something like that. That's not who we are, So I think women are working against that every day. Just a quick statistic, 25% of the broadcast meteorologist world is made up of women. So 1 in 4 meteorologists are females. But only 8% make up chief meteorologists. So I'm a chief meteorologist. And basically what that means is you're the leader of your weather team. So I'm the decision maker of our weather team. I'm kind of the visionary of what our branding looks like, who we are, what we are in the community, and how we do our forecasts. And we're kind of the main person. Anytime there's severe weather, we're the ones that are on air. But yeah, less than 10% of all chief meteorologists are females. So again, that's another area where not only do we need more women kind of in the weather space in general, but then promoting those women that are there to those upper level positions.
Right.
And I think that, and I really think that mirrors a lot of the science community as well. A lot of STEM. I mean, those statistics are not only just for meteorologists. Right. Those statistics are across the engineering map, as you know very well.
All across. Yeah. Right. Trust is important. And for you, you also have to gain the trust of that audience
Absolutely.
And that
takes time.
It takes time, and it isn't going to be 100% ever. I mean, you're never going to be able to win everybody over. Right.
And that's right. I always liken it to like when you go out to a restaurant and you get a drink one night you might want a water, night you might want a glass of tea. And I always say that it's kind of like meteorologists. We might be giving you the same information, but it's just like somebody may want a water one night and they may want a Coke the next. That's kind of how we are. It's like it's your drink of choice for the night. So I always think it's cute when I introduce myself or, we get to chatting and they find out that I do weather on television. And then it's like they immediately feel like they have to apologize because they don't watch TV, or they say, I'm sorry,
I should have known.
I'm like, A, I'm not offended. But B, but it's a good opportunity to start a conversation. And I tell you what, from that, you do gain people. So I also say being a meteorologist is kind of like being a politician. You got to shake a lot of hands and kiss a lot of babies. So yeah. I find myself in the community a lot because part of that winning people over and earning that trust is getting in there and letting them know that you're human, that you're not just somebody that's in a box telling them the weather, but then explaining to them what you do. So a lot of my talks in the community focus around my education, focused around STEM. And I'm now really actually kind of promoting more of that in the school systems and the academia and really kind of just in encouraging more girls to get involved in STEM from a young age and carrying it on through college and adulthood.
Right. The perfectionism thing in my world, in the nuclear world, which is, it's so hazardous. So when you are planning work, you have to make sure that you've considered the hazards to either the co-located worker, so the person right there, or the person across the facility, or even the public, because there are catastrophic consequences if you don't plan it properly. And so I found that kind of trust, even within the industry, is an important thing to build when it comes to your technical prowess, because if not, then the idea of having you on the team and being the decision maker. So this is the women who rise the ranks. What you have to trust that decision maker, because you're the one who's going to sign off on the design, and that the design has built in the proper, criteria to make sure that it's going to be safe. So yeah. I do think in my environment here at Hanford, which is the biggest of all the cleanup, and I have moved around, this one is $2 billion a year. We get $2 billion with a B a year for the cleanup here. And I was one woman out of the 24 person leadership team, and I was the only woman out of 24. I counted it once because I used to have advocates and I used to have mentors, and they were leaving or retiring. And I kind of looked around and was like, got to the org chart and started counting. Was like, oh, no. Like, is this? I feel a little alone. But the other thing is about nurturing. Yeah, I was moved to one. I was a deputy manager over a $17 billion construction project where we're going to take liquid, hazardous, high level waste, and we're going to make it into glass.
Okay.
And then we're going to do deep geologic repository disposition. So it's going to go underground. Yeah. At least, right now we have a repository that's built and ready in Nevada. So out in the middle of nowhere. Okay. For that, I was the deputy manager, and they brought me on more for my people skills than necessarily. I didn't know how to make glass. I was coming from the tank farms, which is where we store the waste. I didn't know how to make glass, but the guy who was the manager is a chemist, and he's a glass chemist. But if we had 50 people on the team and we needed more of a leader manager than just a technical person, but you needed a little bit of both. So when you see those kinds of things, you think about that perfectionism and expectations for us to be perfect is even more than maybe the forgiveness that you get for being a strong man in the industry, it seems.
Right. And you're absolutely spot on there too. And I think that even like women don't allow themselves as much grace either, because we feel like we have to balance everything at home and on the work. But sometimes we don't want to ever talk about home at work because for some reason it makes us feel inferior or weaker, and we need to be strong. And in order to be strong, we need to pretend that this other life, it doesn't exist in this life. And what I've learned is actually marrying the two makes me a better leader because I'm understanding and empathetic and sympathetic. I can lead well, and I can use all those tools in my toolbox, the things that I have at home and at work, to actually be the best leader. And actually, statistics are now showing that women that are in upper level management, there's more retention within businesses and companies, and also their revenue is greater. And we're finding that the revenue is higher because women do have an ability to it's almost like their strategic ability to help a team work through problems is greater sometimes than sometimes men, and so these statistics are now starting to roll out, but still very few women are in large major positions nationwide. CEOs make up maybe less than like 10%. Major companies, Fortune 500 companies, are less than 10% women. And so I mean there's a lot more that we can do, but it's also allowing women, and there's a whole talk for another day, but I'm also a big gender equity advocate. So we've really championed the word equality, I think, for the last 10 and 20 years, and equality is great. But I think that there's a slow shift into understanding equity, because equality is everybody starting a race at the same place, giving all of the same tools, but then you start your race and you run, but everybody's going to finish that race at a different time. Equity is kind of the opposite. Equity is giving people different tools that align with their skill sets and even their personal life, or and then putting them on the racetrack, telling them to run, but everybody finishing the race at the same time. So now we're going from starting at the same point with equality to finishing at the same race with the equity piece. And so that's what I talk a lot about. And as far as understanding how we can support one another, and the support that you get may be a little bit different than the support I get, but what we're doing is ultimately reaching towards that same goal. And the more companies understand that, the more successful they are. It's proven in the numbers.
Right. And I guess like one last thing I would point out too would be that women also need to encourage the equity among women. And that's one of the toughest things when, like you were saying, when there's only less than 10% of the leadership roles are held by women. So women look up and they don't, number one, they don't see anyone there, so they don't know how they're going to get there. Number two, they're like, well, that spot's for me. And then they look at the woman next to them and go, yeah, not you, me, because it can't be competition. Because they don't see enough spots for both of them. Instead, I'd love it if we could look at each other and go, both of us are going to be up there, and it's absolutely it's not like that when the numbers prove how limited it is. So and I would like to see that grow. I don't think it really has since I've been in the world in my first job in 1998. And I really don't think that it's better. And in some ways it's worse, but I do think that that's part of the reason why I invited you here today, and that we're going to have an episode, because creating a community and that ability to talk about it, and using the platform that we both have, which is years of experience and these interesting, not as many females are in our industry. And so we might see it a little highlighted more than others might. So we might as well share it with the community and get everybody talking about it. Maybe that's what move society forward, like you were saying.
Yeah. And honestly, I think it just starts with conversation. Like, I don't even think that it's some elaborate plan. I don't think it's going in and taking numerous courses at your next corporate HR meeting. I think it's literally just having conversations. I call it water cooler speech. Yeah. So now in a COVID world, I don't know if anyone's hanging around the water cooler anymore, a virtual water cooler. But it's just kind of that casual talk that when we start to be more inclusive, and we're doing it in our everyday, it becomes more natural. And when you, just like you said, when we start to feel like the people in the cubicle next to us aren't our competition, but really are our partner for success, I think that changes mindset. And then when we can have managers that are forward thinking enough to realize that our boards of directors, our leadership teams, they need to start looking different. They need to start reflecting the people working, because right now the workforce is actually comprised of about 51% women. A lot of people are surprised to hear that. Now, a lot of those roles may not be, but most of those roles are not top level management roles too. So there's a really big gap between employment opportunities versus leadership opportunities. And that, that's where the conversation is too. But I think once the light bulb starts going off and people start understanding, wait, we need, and I'm not just talking strictly diversity, but diversity in talent, gender, even in race, all of those elements bring something different, and it creates better collaboration and it creates better understanding within a workforce too. But specifically speaking to kind of what we're talking about tonight, women in business matter, and it makes for good decisions, higher profits, higher revenues. Every company wants to hear that, engineer or not. But women can help grow those numbers, and that's essential.
You have 4 kids. Do you have any daughters?
2 and 2. I have 2 boys, 2 girls.
Yeah. Yep. Thinking about the world for the future.
Absolutely. And you know what? And I even think if you have boys, having these conversations with them at a young age is helping them understand and see. And they're looking at you and thinking, look what my mom did. And then when they get in the workforce, they're going to be so much more empathetic with other females that are on their team.
Absolutely.
And they're going to they'll be able to take direction from females too. So if part of the problem, I say problem, but solution that we're trying to solve, right? The solution we're providing is we're trying to get more women in there. Well, sometimes it's hard for men to take direction from women because maybe they're not used to it. It's just not been in their framework. Not that they're not capable or that they're even rude about it. It's just that that's not what they've seen, right? You talked about that just a minute ago. Even women who look towards that corporate ladder, they don't see people that look like them. So they know every time they climb up that rung, it's the first time a female's done that. So it's new, it's different. But I think for young men, for boys, we want to raise them to say, hey, I don't mind if I take direction from a really smart man or a really smart woman. And so I think that there's value in that too. It's not just for parents that have daughters, but this is for parents that have boys too.
Absolutely.
And helping them understand that the work environment as we get older, hopefully will look a lot different than it does today.
Hopefully. Yeah. Hey, thanks so much for your time today.
Yeah, this is great.
It's been fun.
Awesome.
Right,
well, you have a great night.
On the next episode, we will explore alligator hunting season in the South. Many people don't know that the current world record largest alligator was taken from the Alabama River, right down the road from where Cindy lives. We will introduce you to the woman who holds that record. So join us. If you like us, follow us, or subscribe. You can find us on Instagram at twin.fluency. On Facebook, we're Twin Talk, or you can just email us at twinfluencing@gmail.com.
Oh, he's a big fella. Think my big fella. Yes. Hi, Will. Will loves cats. There, good boy.